All right, well, welcome everyone. We thank you so much for being part of this training today, and particularly for you who have agreed in some cases to repeat, but for those of you who are new, to be captains or team captains in the allocation teams. And we're really thrilled. I can't tell you how much that means to us. Over the years, it seems to have been the favorite among all the things that people volunteer for to do at United Way, to be part of the allocations process. So I will spare you any lengthy introduction. I have a welcoming message that I'm going to spare having to repeat twice. I'm going to tell the whole training, so I'll leave it. But to give you a sense of it's going to tie together one of the best writers in America over the years, Chris Christopherson, John Steinbeck and the Grapes of Wrath, a little bit of our situation in Ukraine, and basically just an overall message of hope. But I'll leave you hanging on that one. And at this point, I get the great honor and pleasure of turning things over to our co-chairs of the Community Impact Team, Carol and Peter.
Great, thank you, Dennis. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all, and I echo what Dennis said. We really thank you for being volunteering to be captains and appreciate everything that you do. I know that it's extra work and there's scheduling and there's paperwork, and truly we appreciate the extra effort that you take on as being captains. I also want to thank Dennis and Kim for their energy and what they bring to this process every year to keep us organized and on track in the work that they do. And welcoming Peter, although he's been an allocations panelist and captain for a number of years, I'm so excited that he has joined me as co-chair for the Community Impact Committee. So really looking forward to today as we kick things off. So thank you to everyone, and I'll be brief in getting through this, but I think this is a refresher for many of you that for this round of funding, we're expanding on what we did in 2021 as we were focusing on the recovery areas, and I'll talk about those in more detail on the next slide. But we started this focus, as you know, in 2020 during the beginning of the impacts of COVID-19. And if you can believe it, 2 years later, fingers crossed, we're heading in a positive direction, which is wonderful. But we went through a really thoughtful process during that time and looking at the needs of our communities. And Kim, if we go to the next page, it really focuses on the 5 areas, the focus areas, but these also align with the interrelated pillars that we've had for the United Way of Greater Plymouth County for a number of years, which focus on education, health, and financial stability. And this really just expands on that in regards to these recovery fund focus areas. Feeding our families, housing and homelessness, access to affordable health services, support for children and youth, which some of you may remember was return to learning. And we also have support for job training and placement, which was Aspire to Hire previously. So we certainly support all of these areas, and the initiatives that you see coming in through the allocations process will directly impact these recovery fund areas as you start reading your proposals for this year. I'm going to turn it over to Peter now for the next slide. I hope that's Peter's slide, and he'll talk about some things. And before I move on, are there any questions on the focus areas or anything that you have questions about? Awesome. Welcome to Peter. Take it away.
Thanks, Carol. And it's been neat joining you as co-chair of the Community Impact Committee. Really enjoyed that working with you and Kim and Dennis. So thanks for the opportunity. This is my 3rd year, and first year I was on a team, and Bill, you were the captain that year, and good to see you again. And then last year I was captain, and Taylor was good working. Taylor was on my team last year, so great to see you as a captain this year. So thanks for joining the ranks of the captains. Hey, so many of you guys got a lot of experience. So these are kind of preaching to the choir here, but just kind of a reminder As captains, just you ought to feel empowered to really take the lead in this process, and also for the virtual visits and feeling comfortable asking questions and doing whatever you can to encourage your team to make the calls interactive. I know the agencies don't like to just kind of preach for an hour. They really like to make it as interactive as possible. So anything you can do to facilitate that goes a long, long way. Also, a lot of the team members are new, so they may not be familiar with the forms or the process. So working with your team members, the new ones, to make sure that they feel comfortable with the process and answering any of their questions. And then also work with the agency contact and team members to schedule site visits for a time that works for everybody. What I've done in the past is just reach out to the agencies and see what day of the week or time of the day works best for them. And then also just have a kind of a kickoff call with my team, let everybody introduce themselves, and then also find out if there are any times of the day or days of the week that work best for your team members, and then put that schedule together. And I think that works out pretty well. And then make sure you submit the everything by May 2nd, and encourage everybody to get their virtual site visits going quickly. Don't wait till the second half of April in case you run into any conflicts. So hopefully also you all have access to a Zoom Pro account or something similar, or work with the agencies to facilitate that, so that you don't want to get on a Zoom account that only has 45 minutes when you need an hour. So working through those kind of logistics up front. And then you should have all the proposal information by now from Kim. I noticed this year some of it's in Word format, some's in PDF, some's in Excel. So make sure you can open all the files up. Some agencies combine the two forms onto one template, onto one file. Others have two different files. So you may want to just take some time now and make sure that you can open all the files up and that you've got them all the files that you need for your 5 proposals. All right, that's it for me, Kim.
Thank you so much, Peter. Those are some really good advice. And I like what you said about the structuring of setting up the site visits too with the agencies. So good to see you all again this year. I won't go on too long. I just echo what Carol and Peter and Dennis said. We're really grateful to have many of you returning for quite a few years, and then some folks that have been on the general panel joining us in a new leadership role this year. It's great to have you all here. As you know, we have the 11 teams. We have 51 panelists this year, so it's going to be an awesome year. And I think the most exciting thing that I get to go over with you will be our new scoring sheets in just a few slides, but just a couple quick reminders, refreshers. So up here, I have the agency site visit information sheet, which will look familiar to everyone because we haven't changed it in the last year or two. But just the key information. So you'll find that on the last page of the narrative, and it has specifically who to contact at the agency to schedule those site visits, a secondary contact just in case you have any trouble hearing back, both a phone number and an email, and then any other helpful tricks or information, best days are Monday and Tuesday or that sort of thing to get you started. We ask our agencies that they get back to our panelists as quickly as possible, but a maximum of 3 days. So if you have any trouble hearing back or you're not getting a response within a couple of days, feel free to let us know and we can help to follow up, but we don't see that happen very often. As Peter was mentioning, you'll get your site visits scheduled and then you'll be conducting them in March and April. So we ask that you please do your best with your team to get at least the dates on the calendar by the end of March. And then, as you know, you as captains are kind of the main liaison between your team members and the agencies to get things scheduled. We're keeping things virtual. Hopefully next year we'll get to be back in person. I know we're seeing a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, as Carol was saying, but we're requiring every single initiative has a video site visit, just like we did last year. So make sure, even though we're in the virtual world, that you do get the opportunity to do those site visits. Our agencies are certainly prepared for them. We've told them to really be ready to showcase some videos, to show some tours, some pictures, maybe some testimonials, that kind of thing. And we did prep them too that many agencies do have Zoom accounts that their organizations have. So if you don't have the capacity to host a Zoom call, please feel free to reach out to your agency and they should be able to get you sorted out there. And again, come back to us at United Way if ever there's a scenario where there's a challenge in getting those videos scheduled, and we can certainly help out there too. So the new scoring sheets, we have our friend Alyssa Alley on the call today, and we have to give her a huge shout out because she's really helped us along with Carolyn Peters' input. And Dennis and I took a look and made some very minor changes to really improve our scoring sheets this year. We had our summer meeting where we did appreciation and feedback from you all, which is always so helpful. And we were talking about how the scoring sheets, just whatever it is, every year they give a little bit of trouble to someone or that kind of thing. And Alyssa had some great suggestions for ways to improve them. So she spent a good deal of time creating these new drafts for us that we have since finalized and we're excited to show. So I know I emailed them out, and we'll open it up at the end of this training for any questions you all may have that either Alyssa or I can answer. But the high level information here, we have one sheet for all of the initiatives. So the site visit scoring sheet is built into the overall sheet, which will have all 5 initiatives, 4 to 5 per team, but a slot for all 5 on one page with the scoring at the bottom. There'll be a separate workbook for you all as captains to complete that has some nice formulas and shortcuts built in to hopefully make things a lot easier. We ask that you please kind of just add in your team's initiative, so agency and initiative information at the top, and then email it out to your teammates this year, just hopefully to avoid any confusion with them all being on one sheet. And you'll see in the color coding, hopefully that will help as well. And I'll open them up in just a moment. So this is what the team member scoring sheet looks like. Again, I think you're all familiar with it, and we'll go through this one. We'll open up the Excel spreadsheet on the Allocation Panelist training. I won't go through it now, but as we were saying, we have the we have our friend Kathy Duggan joining us. We have the site visit scoring at the bottom here that will auto-populate onto the top for the general agency score, which is wonderful. And then an opportunity for the agencies and the initiatives to be listed and to kind of match their pastel colors. And every scoring sheet, the team member one and the captain's one, has a great first tab that has some great instructions. Here's what the captain sheet looks like. I think one of the key tips here is that when you're pasting in your team member scores, you'll just want to make sure you're pasting in the values so that you just get the numbers as opposed to dragging over any formulas or anything that will mess up with the beautiful grid and formulas that are built. And then you'll probably remember in the past that we had a number of scoring sheets for different team member sizes. So for example, we had one for a team of 3, a separate tab for a team of 4, and so on. But this year we just have the one sheet that has the formula built in. So as long as you don't add zeros, you just leave them blank for the number of team members that were able to go to the site visitor that are on your team, it should auto calculate the score, which is great. And there's plenty of spots on the side for comments, which, as we all know, are really helpful for us as we are working with Community Impact Committee and the board to make those funding decisions. So I'm just going to quickly stop sharing and open up the spreadsheet itself so that we can look at it together. See, team captains. So this is what it looks like. I bet a lot of you have had a chance to already open it up and thumb through it, but these are the instructions, as we mentioned, that are really helpful, I think, especially when you're doing the work, when you're about to actually start entering in the scores. Pretty much all what we've described is laid out here. This team info tab is really handy. So you only have to enter in your team number, your captain, your name, and then the numbers of your teammates once, and then it will automatically update on all of the tabs, those yellow sections. So it'll say, team number 3, captain is Bill, here are Bill's 4 teammates, and it'll repeat on agency 2, 3, and so on. I think it's helpful to rename those tabs with the names of your agencies, which again, a number of you do. You all are really pros at this point. So we're hoping that this will make it even easier for you, but just to keep things organized. And then of course, you'll want to make sure that you follow the same layout as you have on the team member column. So agency 1 is, say, the Boys and Girls Club on the team member, and it's also agency 1 on here. And we've tried to keep the color scheme the same too. So you'll just match up blue with blue and so on. And I think I'll pause here. Either Alyssa, let me know if I'm missing anything important, which I probably am, or if folks have any questions about the new scoring sheets for the captain's view or for the general view too.
Nope, you're doing great, Kim.
Thank you again. Does anyone have any questions at this point? I'm just scrolling. I can't see you all on one screen with the screen share, so feel free to unmute too if I happen to be missing a hand up or anything. And of course, as we get closer and you're actually filling them out, we are more than happy to go through questions as they come up and questions from teammates and that sort of thing. I'm going to pull the slides back up. I think I have just 2 or 3 more to finish up. There we go. So the partnership compliance scoring, again, is something that is familiar as we've been doing it for a number of years. And Dennis will go through the pieces of it more in depth at the next session. But basically, the 3 things that our currently funded partner agencies are scored on are their co-branding with United Way, their participation, and their campaign. And we've decided with impact, again, from our CIC, our Community Impact Committee, and our board to increase that from 5 points to 10 points. So that's one minor change to be aware of. We've already gone through and with input from resource development and from our staff, we've given them an initial score, which was emailed out to all of our team captains. We ask that you just make sure that you're the one that puts that in. You might get, members that get confused and forget about that part. So when the scores come back, you make sure that it matches what we had set out, unless you have any suggestions for feedback, maybe on the site visit, they didn't score too high in co-branding, but you see that they really have United Way signage all over the place, or they show a brochure or that kind of thing, or they mention participation. Where we welcome any feedback for changing that with comment, but if not, please just leave it as it is on there. And again, just double check that as the end as you are submitting them back to us. And then the team wrap up meeting. It's always really nice at the end to have sort of a conclusion meeting before the scoring sheets are officially sent back to us. So a great way for everyone to kind of sit down together and say, this is maybe how I scored agency 1. What do other folks think? You might share some ideas that make sense and come up with more of a consensus score as to what the team would like to submit for the initiatives. It's also a nice chance for someone that maybe couldn't make all of the site visits or wasn't able to be as involved as they'd like to be, to still be able to offer some input and maybe ask some questions even ahead of time, hey, I can't make the site visit, but would you mind asking this question? And then you could discuss what the response was at a kind of wrap up meeting. And of course, you're more than welcome to do that on Zoom too, or a conference call. If you feel like getting out and getting a cup of coffee or something, all the better. But we want that to be a nice, simple call for you as well. And then again, once all is done, you can send those scores right back to us. And I think, yeah, that takes us to the end of kind of our general captain overview this afternoon. We thank you all so much. And again, we have a little bit of time for any questions before we jump into our 3:30 training. If anyone has any thoughts, questions, or even tips that you've learned over the years as panelists that you'd like to share, as Peter did. Some of those helpful tips are always nice to share with one another.
No question, but I just want to say great job on the scoring sheet. I really like it for this year. I think it's going to streamline things and make things a lot easier for everyone.
Awesome. That's great to hear.
One of the things, Kim, that our team decided to do last year, and every team kind of different, finds their own rhythm and what works for them. But our team, we set aside an hour and a half for every virtual visit, and we had an hour with the agency, and then 30 minutes just the team, so we could review the results as a team right away while it was fresh in our mind, and that worked well. And then at the end, we got everybody together and reviewed all the results of all 5 visits and just made sure it made sense before we submitted it to you. So just one way of doing it.
Yeah, I like that. If time allows, while it's right fresh from the site visit, that's a great idea.
I would just want to emphasize how important it is when you are reviewing proposals and doing site visits, any comments that are really relevant to the either success or the challenges of the initiatives are really helpful to us, because it never fails. Every year, if someone doesn't get funding, we get at least a couple requests. Can we go over the proposals? And while we don't reveal the scoring, we do share with them some of the comments so that they can improve on their application and have a better chance next year. And we have found it to be a very productive opportunity. So really, any comments that you have as a team that you come up with, if someone is particularly struggling and the initiative doesn't go real well from your perspectives, or if someone is absolutely stellar and amazing, and we've seen some scores that approach 100 and are at 100, it's nice to know why you've ranked those so high as well, because you never know. People always are interested. Those people who typically do so well still ask about how did we do and can we improve on what we've done. And it's nice to be able to reinforce someone who's put a great deal of effort into the initiatives. And you folks, your feedback is just always appreciated. So I just want to reinforce that. By all means, help us with comments as you see them being appropriate. Go anyway. I had promised the captains, who you must know have been meeting for the last half hour, and it's wonderful to have them on board, and to have the rest of you. If you're returning allocation panelists, thank you. If you are new to the allocations volunteering role, thank you for doing that. Before we begin, the times, as you well understand, are challenging, as we are kind of getting to the end of, we hope, the worst part of the pandemic stuff, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. But at the same time, our world is challenged by an awful, awful war with so many people suffering. And one of the things I wanted to share with you as we begin this was a little bit of positivity. And I had whet the appetite of the captains by saying this is going to entail I think one of the best songwriters that we have over the years in this country, in Chris Christopherson. If you're not familiar with Chris Christopherson, and I'd like to think that you all are, he wrote the song "Me and Bobby McGee" that was actually recorded beyond himself. It was recorded by Janis Joplin. He recorded "Sunday Morning Coming Down," "Why Me," one of the longer titles on the planet, which was "Loving Her Was Easier Than Anything I'll Ever Do Again," which I thought was amazing. It's a beautiful song, actually. But a number of years ago, well, I hate to say how many, but now we're close to 30 anyway, he wrote a song that probably didn't see much of the light of day, but it referred to, he said he wrote it by watching a scene in the movie The Grapes of Wrath. And obviously The Grapes of Wrath was written by John Steinbeck, and it chronicled the Joad family in some very challenging times, the Dust Bowl days, the Depression, and the families migrating to the West to find places where they could do farming. And they referred to people unkindly as Okies, as they were coming from Oklahoma in a lot of cases. So when you were called an Okie, it was you were being belittled as being poor and a migrant. And anyway, the song is called, and I'm not going to be singing it in case you're worried about that, but it's called "Here Comes That Rainbow Again." And I'll finally get to the point when we get to the end of this. But it goes like this. It says, "The scene was a small roadside cafe. The waitress was sweeping the floor. Two truck drivers drinking their coffee, and two Okie kids by the door. How much are them candies?" they asked her. "How much do you have?" she replied. "We've only a penny between us." "Them's two for a penny," she lied. And the daylight grew heavy with thunder, with the smell of the rains on the wind. Ain't it just like a human? Here comes that rainbow again. One truck driver called to the waitress after the kids went outside. "Them pennies ain't two for a candy. Those candies ain't two for a penny. So what's it to you?" she replied. In silence, they finished their coffee and got up and nodded goodbye. She called, "Hey, you left too much money." "So what's it to you?" they replied. And it ends with the chorus, "And the daylight was heavy with thunder, with the smell of the wind. Ain't it just like a human? Here comes that rainbow again." I was captivated by this very simple scene, and it was captured to me again when I was really obsessing over how awful the war in Ukraine is, when I saw that picture of those baby carriages and strollers along the railroad station in Poland when the refugees were coming as gifts so that they could help the families to kind of carry their children and impart their children to hopefully safety and food and shelter. We're going through some tough times, both in our world and in our communities. It is wonderful to have you with us through that volunteering and making everybody's life so much better by your role in it, by distributing the dollars that get raised from so many generous individuals and companies. So thank you so much for being here and volunteering. Kim, we can kind of go through and start the slides. So many good things in the midst of the challenges happening. And one of the really exciting things is United Way Worldwide has hired its first woman who is the first African American. And she is saying, the question is, how can we work together to create a strategy that supports our vision with tangible metrics and meaningful outcomes? It's still our biggest challenge, is to try to figure out how to measure and make a difference of the impact of these dollars that we're investing back in our community. But we're excited, and we think that that Angela Williams is a breath of fresh air. She's very sensitive, obviously, to the issues of diversity, and we want to highlight that. But I think I found her in the very short run to be an incredibly good listener, and I hope we all are good listeners. So next slide, please. This is our service area. As many of you know, if you don't, we have served, with your help last year, over 60,000 people through not only the allocations process, but calls to 211, our drug prescription card, our family center. We do so many things with your help, and it's important to realize that so many people say, well, so much of the funding rests in the city of Brockton and the town of Plymouth. Well, if you look at the numbers of people we serve there, you can obviously see why. 50% of them are in the city of Brockton, and just about 10% of them are in the town of Plymouth, and then they're spread out across a greater, wider area. But most people do go for services in those two areas, and it's part of what we do when we're looking at that. Next slide, Kim. As Carol was talking to the captains earlier, though you're going to hear about the need areas that we've had for the last several years during the pandemic and the recovery areas, they're still largely tucked underneath the larger framework, which is United Way focuses on three primary areas of health, education, and financial stability. And we recognize, just as we recognize that no one organization will solve the problems, these three are pillars of what we need to do to address the problems in our community. But as I mentioned, we'll be having more details around those need areas that we're focusing on again this year. And then at this point, I think then I'm going to, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce both Carol and Peter as the co-chairs of the United Way's Community Impact Board Committee, and offer them to walk you through the next few slides. Carol?
Thanks, Dennis. We had a comment, so if everyone wouldn't mind putting themselves on mute, and certainly jump off if you have any questions during the presentation. We're happy to answer questions, and I know we'll be giving people a lot of time, so thank you for putting yourselves on mute. We really appreciate that. I want to echo what Dennis just said. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate your time and talents that you give us. And so great to see so many returning volunteers and so many new people that have joined us this year. So we thank you for that, and looking forward to a great allocation season. To start here, and Dennis mentioned this a little bit, but for this round of funding, we're expanding our work from 2021. Some of you that have been here for a number of years know that in 2020, we, hard to believe, 2 years later, we started to look at the impacts of COVID on our communities. And we went through a very thoughtful process. And as Dennis mentioned, it really focuses on three key pillars: education, health, and financial stability. And we certainly want to continue to focus on those areas, but there were also 5 areas that were of a critical need to our group. And here are the 5 areas. Feeding our families. So when you look at your initiatives this year, the focus of those initiatives should be centered around these 5 recovery areas. Feeding our families, housing and homelessness, access to affordable health services, support for children and youth, formerly known as return to learning, and support for job training and placement, which was previously aspire to hire. And all of these initiatives, like I said, will focus, that you'll be reading about, will focus on these recovery areas. So Kim, next slide. The other piece of this as well is Dennis mentioned Angela Williams in the beginning, and the information on this slide really aligns with the United Way Worldwide focus and the staff and our board here locally for the United Way in regards to partnership and collaboration and how important that is to the success of initiatives within our community. So those partnerships where there are opportunities for organizations to partner together has really been a positive thing in our communities, and looking at the families that are so vulnerable within our groups as we've worked through this COVID-19 piece, and we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully, so which is great news. The other thing that you will realize as we're going through this, and a new piece this year that we've asked agencies to provide us, is their statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I will tell you that our board also worked on a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement this year. We had very thoughtful conversations around that, and it's really important that as we look at the challenges within our area, understanding that individuals who may be more impacted with issues of race and equity and justice may have some deeper challenges in regards to the things that they face in our community. So we've asked every agency to provide us with diversity, equity, and inclusion statements. Kim will go into that a little bit more when she gets to the paperwork, but that was an important part of this process that we added this year. Next slide, and I think I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Peter Smith, who has been on the allocations committee and a captain, and now joins me as the co-chair of the Community Impact Committee. I'm very excited to be working with Peter. He has been dedicated to this process, like I said, for a number of years, and his input has been instrumental for the Community Impact Committee since he joined us earlier this year. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Carol. Great to be part of the Community Impact Committee and co-chairing with you. So thanks for that. Just a couple things that are changes for 2022, 2023 process. And what's neat is that the team makes steps every year to improve the process and to streamline it. And thanks to Kim and Dennis for taking the lead on that. And it's great to see the improvements that we have this year. So some of the improvements that you'll see is one, it's just a one-part submission process this year, and that's really for the agencies. The agencies were in the past, they had 2 different submittal dates. Now they just have 1. So it just simplifies the whole submittal process for them. Also, we're down to 3 forms that they need to complete. And the last 2 are the ones that you all see. So you see the initiative, narrative, proposal, and then the budget. So what you'll see this year is some of them are in PDF, some are in Word, some are in Excel, but they're all there, and you should have them by now. And so make sure you've got them, and make sure you're able to open those up, those files up. Also this year, more of a focus on the collective impact indicators. Take a look at section 5. That's where the agencies are required to fill out some information this year that really lets us know their impact on the 5 focus areas. There's 2 parts to that. One is a check the box section and one is a free form section. And then the last change this year is increased partnership compliance scores from 5 to 10. So we talked about that and felt that was we needed to increase the focus on the partnership compliance. So we increased the score from 5 points to 10 points. You know, for those that weren't part of it last year, we had carrying over some of the changes from last year to this year, and that is the number of initiatives. So it's each agency can submit 1 proposal per focus area with a maximum of 5. And United Way is looking to fund 50 initiatives. Then the range again this year is initiative proposals can be anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000. And then there's also, again, this year, a requirement that the agency be in business for at least a year. And that includes, they need to have financial statements for that time frame. And then we talked a lot about virtual versus in person, but the important thing is we need to be consistent across all of our agencies. So again, this year, as in last year, we're going to go ahead and do everything virtually this year. I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yes, thank you, Peter. I was unmuting and thank you. And just so you're aware, I normally like to be able to see people's faces and I don't mind showing mine, except where I might be having to get close to the screen and it might frighten some of you if I get that close. So I'm going to kind of put my screen out for a moment while we go through a few more slides. The partner agency compliance agreement is part of the important part of the allocation process. It's that, you know, we have compliance issues, co-branding and fundraising standards and policies that are intended to provide mutual marketing benefits and to fully support the annual fundraising campaigns. United Way staff and our allocation volunteers will kind of monitor for this compliance. And it's just really important that you understand we don't just have people do things just to make them do things. There's really a value to what we're asking the agencies to do as part of this agreement. Kim, why don't you go to the next one? There you go. Thank you. Co-branding requirements, signage and logo and usage on people's websites and in their letterhead. United Way, we provide the window decals and signs as well as electronic logos. So there's no excuse why people can't show. Most nonprofits understand that when you get awarded grants, that it's always expected that you will share the information about where the funding sources are, and United Way is no different. It's really important for us because we can't continue to raise resources if people can't see the visible results of where their dollars go. So we require that the organizations co-brand, and you'll be, you know, when you go doing site visits, when you're there, you'll have an opportunity to see, do they have signage? Are they kind of giving a reasonable acknowledgement that United Way is part of the solutions of some of the programs that they're trying to run? Reporting requirements are also a very important part of what United Way expects from funded organizations. So at the end of the year, we ask organizations to turn a year-end report that includes demographic information, success stories, outcomes, pictures. Very, very important in terms of marketing and very important. And it's funny, when I was trying to develop my 90-second, elevator speech that you're all supposed to do to talk about your organizations. And I remember being particularly proud of developing one that talked about how United Way is a community builder and a convener, and that we bring people together to solve the community's problems. Jim Blake, president and CEO of Harbor One, very politely smiled at me, said, you know, that's wonderful, Dennis, but people don't care about that. He said they care about you know, what are you doing, and kind of they want their heartstrings tugged a little bit. So for us, part of knowing how to convey that to the community is pictures and testimonies and year-end reports about the impact of what the dollars actually did. So reporting requirements are, again, not just an empty compliance issue. They're really vital to our success. And then partnership events and activities requirements are our agency executives meetings that are every other month, in addition to our annual meeting, our annual kickoffs and days of caring, inclusion, involvement in our volunteer platform. We really need the organizations not to just be recipients of funds and they come back to us only once a year. We need the relationships and we need their involvement. We need their active participation in coming up with identifying community needs and talking about some of their successes and how they've worked effectively in the community. So we really do require that they are at United Way events and that they are actively involved in a lot of our activities throughout the year. So the co-branding, reporting requirements, partnership events, and then a United Way campaign. It doesn't make sense to not have the agencies that are receiving funds not do a United Way campaign themselves. That said, mind you, recognizing that they're nonprofit organizations, we're not necessarily holding them to a certain measuring stick in terms of how successful that campaign is or how much they raise, just simply the fact that they give their employees and their volunteers an opportunity to be involved in a United Way campaign. And some of the organizations in the area, as you understand, are fairly large and they do very successful United Way campaigns. Some of them are very small and volunteer driven, not with a lot of staff. So our expectations are all reasonable in that term, but we do require that they do a United Way campaign. All right, key points related that we shared with the agencies so that you're aware of them. Measurable outcomes, which we mentioned at the beginning, it's really critical that we find ways that we can visibly see the success of what the distribution of funds that we've raised, again, through the generosity of area companies and leadership givers. We really need to see how they've been successful at the end of the day. It's nice to say that we do all these classes and education opportunities, English as a second language class, but if we don't know at the end of the day that that leads to people having a greater likelihood that they're going to graduate, or that they might have a better opportunity to go on in their educations or in their jobs, if we can't kind of find tangible results, then it's going to be hard for us to continue to have people to volunteer and invest in what we're doing. So it's critical, and we tell the agencies that that's important for our volunteers to be able to visibly see concrete, very clearly stated and brief examples of what are measurable outcomes from the resources being invested. The process is volunteer driven. You're evidence of that. You are here, they know that. But we want them to understand that when they're reviewed by volunteers, that the volunteers will not necessarily have any idea of the particular organizations or the initiatives that are funded. So they need to assume that you don't know anything about them, and they also need to be receptive to your questions. And even they need to be sensitive enough. If you look confused or curious about something, they need to ask you. We found occasionally in our process in the past that when people haven't asked questions and the agencies score poorly because the volunteers didn't get all the information they needed, that was an unnecessary thing to happen. So we're saying to the agencies, do not assume that the volunteers know anything. Treat them as if it's all new to them and make sure you answer all the questions, particularly asking them, is there any disconnects between the narrative and what the volunteers are seeing on site during the site visits? It's really critical that you communicate and you feel all very comfortable asking questions and getting them answered. Okay, next. There, in spite of the fact that we have had terrific volunteers who have given us great feedback, and we've developed what you will hear and see are some really remarkable forms for the scoring of the narratives and the site visits. It's still a subjective process. There are subjective elements to it. So that's just normal. We do not share the scores with the organizations, but we do share with the organizations any comments that you might have. If they didn't do particularly well, or if they did do particularly well, we're happy to share with our partner organizations in order to improve their chances that they'll receive funding next year as well. So it is a subjective process, and again, nothing wrong with that. We do try to be consistent. You folks over the years have been wonderful, and we've had very little concerns or issues that come up, and when they do, we've had great conversations. So again, just the agencies are aware that it's a volunteer process, and it has some subjective elements to it. These are also important, and as you can understand why. If you don't feel that there's local impact to the dollars that have been raised and going to be distributed to these organizations, it's of a concern as volunteers. You all live and work in the greater Plymouth County area. So the fact that the nonprofits who are applying for United Way funds need to prove that there's a real impact locally is important, all right? And that decision-making is done locally, and that people have connected with the people who are in need of services to find out what it is exactly they need. And that relates to the next area, is the targeted need. We really at United Way are expecting that all the resources that we've raised and distributed to different nonprofit organizations are going to be used for the 15% of our population who are of greatest need. We have somewhere just over 500,000 residents of Greater Plymouth County. If you take 15% of that, it's about 75,000 people that we're trying to impact in some way. So we're hoping to get there, as you noted earlier, as we noted earlier. We served last year over 60,000. We've got a ways to go of people who are in need. And then lastly, the partnerships are vital. We recognize that no one organization, no matter how good it is, big it is, diverse it is unlikely to be able to resolve the problems in our community all by itself. And so we rely on and expect that they need to rely on and document the partnerships that they have with other organizations in order to solve the solutions in our community, or solve the problems of our community. So partnerships is something we emphasize as being very important. Please make sure you not only accept what those partnerships are, but you ask questions about them. We're not looking for people to just sign a bunch of agreements saying we're partnering to work together. We'd like you to be able to see evidence of those partnerships. So if agency A is talking about partnering with agency B, you need to be able to see some proof of that as you are asking questions about the initiatives that they're sharing. And virtual site visit tips. This again is our third year of working through virtual site visits. We want you to understand that we wrestled with this year the idea of thinking about going to in-person volunteer site visits. But if we couldn't do it for everyone, we didn't feel it was appropriate to do it for some, because then it might set an inconsistency in the process that everybody should either be seen virtually or everybody should be seen in person. So we're hoping to get back to that next year. If you know, the ideal, we've said to the agencies, is you pre-record a lot of your tours. It is a simpler way to go through it. We've discovered that when people try to do live tours, and they certainly can do live tours virtual though they may be on Zoom, but you end up having very often more technical problems. And the worst thing that could happen is the agency struggling to show you what they're doing and then has trouble with it. So if they pre-record it, they then have that ability to know that they captured what they were trying to capture. So we encourage them to try to pre-record if they can, and then provide the videos and or other presentations via a shared screen as we're doing today for this training. So that's important. And then photos and testimonials, again, as we mentioned earlier, as part of the year-end report, but even during this virtual event, the site visit, really they're very important to see testimonials and see pictures of folks, whether they've in confidence probably only going to give you first names of the clients who are served for their confidentiality issues. But those are just a couple tips around the site visits. Then I think, am I correct? Is that the last slide for you? It is. I love seeing this calendar. You should love seeing this calendar because it means I can stop stumbling around and turn it over to my much more capable colleague, Kim Scotland, to finish out and talk about some of the forms and the due dates and the timelines. Kim?
Thank you so much, Dennis. And thanks again to Carol and Peter for their leadership, and a shout out to our Community Impact Committee. I know we have Cheryl Shostak here. We have Barbara Cowgill here, some of the members that have been longstanding members of that committee that also serve in the role of allocations panelists. And thank you all so much for being here. I think we had close to 50 on the call, which is amazing. We have 51 allocations panelists this year. So thanks so much for showing up, and we're looking forward to a great year. Almost half of our panelists are new this year, which is wonderful. So some of this information is, of course, repetitive, though we do have some exciting scoring sheets that we'll be showing soon that will hopefully help us streamline this year. And we will be sharing these slides afterwards. I'm not sure if we mentioned that at the beginning. So if you're taking notes, don't feel like you need to. We'll have them sent out afterwards. And we'll also have this recording available for anyone that has to hop off earlier, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go over the dates, a couple of general guidelines and tips, and then we'll spend some time on those scoring sheets and make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So today's the big day we've been waiting for. Today's our first training meeting with all of our allocations panelists and our Community Impact Committee. You will be scheduling the site visits. You're welcome to start having the site visits take place anytime really after today, but at least having them scheduled with your team captains and the agencies by the end of March. We've given our agencies kind of that mark to be aware of just so that they know when to expect to hear from you. And then you'll be reviewing the funding proposals and the budgets and conducting those virtual site visits from now through the end of April. The scoring sheets are due back to our United Way, so teammates will turn those into our captains to send back to us on May 2nd this year. That's a Monday, so you have through the month of April to finish any site visits. We will meet with our Community Impact Committee in the middle of May to review all of your scores and comments so that that committee can prepare to make funding recommendations to our volunteer board of directors. The board meets this year on May 19th to vote on the agency allocations for 2022 to 2023. From there, we send out funding notifications to all agencies, usually around the middle of June, so they have a little bit of time to prepare for a July 1 start. And then we will reach out to all of you to have hopefully an in-person, but certainly a gathering to get your feedback and to show our appreciation about this year's process, to share funding information, that sort of thing over the summer, likely in July. So now I'm just going to go through some of the guidelines and expectations with you all. As we told our captains, you all are really great United Way ambassadors. You understand how the process works. You get to see a little bit of the behind the scenes action. And we want you to feel comfortable and confident asking questions at those site visits. So perhaps you have a question as you're reading through things that you want to ask, or you kind of see something in the written narrative that sounds a little bit off from what you're hearing at the site visit. Please feel free to shout those out, to ask those questions. Our agencies are prepared for those, and they love to hear questions and kind of have a chance to explain something that might cause confusion rather than maybe just having a point docked. We ask that you take the time to please read through those proposals and those narratives ahead of the site visit so you are familiar with your agencies, and do your best. We know you're all busy and this is a volunteer commitment, which we really appreciate, but to try to make your schedule flexible so that as many folks can get to those site visits as possible. I think they're really the most fun of the process, and it's great to have as many team members as possible on those site visits. You'll fill out your scoring sheets with comments whenever possible, as Dennis was mentioning, of both high scores and low scores. We ask that if an agency scores below 85%, that you make sure you give us some comments just in case they ask for a debriefing session and we can provide some general feedback. But any comments are helpful. You are more than welcome to ask your team captains any questions that come up. They are really veterans. Many of them have a great expertise in the area. All of them do, in fact, but many of them have a number of years being involved with this process. And of course, the captains know how to reach us at United Way if there are any questions that we can help to answer. So this is the organization profile and eligibility checklist. And this is what we ask of all of our partners that you don't see. So you're seeing the specific requests for proposals and the budgets for funding. But we go through a fairly comprehensive eligibility checklist and a number of things that we ask of our partners before they get to the point that they are now. So this is just what that cover page looks like. Our finance committee reviews agency financials. We ask for nonprofit status, mission statement. There's that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that Carol asked for that's kind of woven throughout the process. It's very important to us. And a number of other requirements. We just wanted to give you that whole context. You see the big picture. And of course, if any comments come up, we will let the team captains know to be aware of anything as you're doing the site visits this year. So the site visits themselves, usually they are about an hour in length for your planning purposes. They might be slightly shorter in the virtual role as there's not as much walking throughout and that sort of thing, but please plan for about an hour or so per site visit. And they're intended to give you all a quick and general overview of the agency's facility, their staff, and the individuals served. Our agencies have done a really great job over the last couple of years showing you almost what it feels like to be there in person in the site visits, virtual this year. So we appreciate everyone's flexibility. Again, we'll have those on the books by the end of March and performed anytime from the middle of March through the end of April. And they're a nice opportunity for you all to kind of see the consistency of what you read and what you're seeing when you get to talk to the agencies. And you may deduct points if you see some non-compliance issues. This slide is pretty much repetitive. I won't go over all of the information here, but every initiative will have its own site visit. So if you have, for example, 5 initiatives, you'll have 5 virtual site visits. We recommend using Zoom or a similar Microsoft Teams, that sort of thing, platform. We've let our agencies know that not every team has the capacity to have their own Zoom Pro account or that sort of thing, and they're more than happy to help set those up if needed. So don't hesitate to ask your agency contact, would you be able to set up the video call if that's not something that your team has the capacity for? So specifically the site visits, and this is what you'll be scoring them on, will cover the programming, the staffing, the evidence of collaboration. Some of the proposals are specifically collaborative, but we ask all of our proposals to have that partnership element, as Dennis had talked about. The evidence of the target population who's being served, and then if the agency is currently receiving United Way funding in this year, you would ask for the evidence of the partnership. So you just see some pictures here of our window clings and our signage. And you may be thinking, well, how do I see that on a virtual site visit? But again, the agencies have done a nice job of having maybe a picture of our sign up by the door, or maybe one of the program classrooms where the funded initiative is taking place has a sign up. And you might see that as part of a tour. But if you don't, it's certainly appropriate to ask, how are you meeting the compliance from United Way? And the team captains got those compliance scores ahead of time. So they have a bit of an idea too that they can share with the team. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the initiative budget. So again, every proposal has a narrative and a budget. And some of you are way, looking at budgets day in and day out, experts in the area, and know exactly what to look for or what might be looking off. But some of us aren't looking at that sort of thing day in and day out. So we just wanted to go over kind of high level what we're looking for. So the most important thing to remember is just obvious red flags, things that jump out to you. Does the budget itself make sense for the initiative? Does the request seem reasonable for the scope of services that you're seeing? Is United Way the only funder, or do they have a diverse number of funders coming in for that initiative? And that's not to say that if United Way is the only funding source that that's an issue. It's just something to be aware of. Say that the agency receives partial funding or that sort of thing. That might even be something that's worth asking. What would you do if you only received a partial amount of your request? So this is an example of a budget form where we put in some sort of red flags just to point out to you. So this is what it looks like if you haven't had a chance yet to go through your proposals that were sent out at the end of last week. And we've just highlighted a few key things here. So The first one, it is absolutely welcome for agencies to share any in-kind support that they're getting for the initiative. But we ask that they, one, let us know what that in-kind support is, and two, if they have the revenue coming in, that they have a balancing offsetting expense. So you'll see on this spreadsheet here, we have 5,000 in in-kind support, but there's nothing listed in in-kind expenses here. We have a lot listed underneath other revenue. There's 40,000 listed as other revenue on this budget, but as we say on the side here, we ask that they let us know where that's coming from, and there's no additional detail here. So it might be helpful to say, you know, we noticed a lot in the other revenue section. Could you let us know what other funding sources you might be getting? And then a big one, this one probably stood out to all of you, is just we'd love to have our budgets balance, of course, or at least be close to balancing. And there's a significant off here between 55,000 in total revenue and the expenses being 100,000. So that would be certainly something to ask about at the site visit. And then here is a real example from last year of a budget that's pretty good. So, you know, after being familiar with what the request is, it looks like that 20,000 is within the range of what we have folks ask for, and it makes sense for the scope of services. They have some other revenue listed, and they let us know exactly where that's coming from. It's organized. Obviously, the budget balances out well. There's also some miscellaneous expenses here at the bottom, and they let us know exactly what those are made up of. So there's no question. It's a nice, clean, simple budget that is a good example of what we're looking for. And then here are a few questions that you might want to consider asking specifically related to the budget during the site visit. You certainly do not have to ask these questions, but it's just a reference point if you're kind of thinking of where's a good place to start. Some of the bottom bullets are some newer ones that we've come up with in the last year or so that I think are particularly good. How do you monitor your expenses and your revenue of the initiative throughout the whole budget year? What kind of safeguards might you have in place to make sure you stay on budget? That sort of thing. So we'll, again, send these slides out and you'll have them handy. And then some general sample site visit questions for both the proposal and the budget are on this slide. Again, I won't go through all of them, but some of the keywords are, you know, what does sustainability look like? What kind of challenges might you be experiencing? You know, how has the pandemic, thankfully we're getting a little bit toward the end of the tunnel, but how has it impacted maybe what you've been doing at your agency? How has it changed how you would implement this initiative? Those sort of questions are always helpful. And then the scoring sheet. So we gave a big shout out at our panelist captain training, and I hope I don't embarrass Alyssa, but I have to give her another shout out at this all panelist training. So Alyssa Alley from Ocean Spray was really instrumental this year in helping us to improve and streamline our scoring sheets. For those of you that have been a part of the process in the past, we always have a couple of questions every year. There's a lot of components to score and a couple of different spreadsheets. So this year, we've made some great changes with Alyssa's input, and then with our community impact input with Carol and Peter going through them as well, and a few minor changes from Dennis and myself, so that we're all on hopefully a great place this year when it comes to scoring, and it will make it easier for everyone. So I'm going to pull those up in just a minute so we can take a closer look at them. But just some general guidelines here. So every initiative will have its own scoring sheet that you'll need to complete. Again, if an initiative scores below 85, we require that you give us some comments so we understand what's going on there. The team captains have already received the suggested compliance scores for currently funded partner agencies. We welcome your input if there's anything that you see on the site visit that might make us want to change those points. We would just ask that you put them in the comment section. But in general, as a general panelist, you don't have to worry about that section. Your team captain will put in what the compliance score is for the agency out of 1 to 10 points. And then you will send your scoring and your comments back to your captain at the end of the process, and they will get those over to us at United Way. We recommend what we call consensus scoring. So we love to have a team wrap-up meeting at the end of the process. Once all of the site visits are completed, you've had a chance to do your initial scoring, write down your comments. We recommend just doing a quick, maybe half-hour Zoom call, or of course, you're welcome to meet in person if you have that comfort and capacity to do that, just to kind of talk through the scores with your team. Occasionally we'll have a member have to miss a site visit, or maybe they weren't able to be as involved as they hoped to be with the last minute scheduling thing come up, and they can share their input on the initiatives and everyone can kind of talk to it together before the final scores are submitted. So we love to have that consensus model whenever possible. So this is what the scoring sheet looks like. All of the sort of pastel colors are the areas that you will highlight, and you will see you have all 5 of your agencies. So each team has 4 to 5 initiatives and agencies that you're reviewing on the same spreadsheet. In the past, we would have a separate tab for each one. Here we have them all combined in one. And the bottom half has the scoring for the site visit. So you will put in the scores there and it will automatically populate up here. Again, we'll open it up in just a second. And the first tab has a lot of great helpful instructions that we recommend you start with. That will make a lot of sense as you're going in to put the scores in themselves. This is what the team captain scoring sheet looks like. So once you've completed your individual scores and you've had that meeting, you'll send them over to your captain, and they'll have the capacity to put all of the team member scores together and average them, combining your comments with a tab for each of the up to 5 agencies that you are reviewing. So at this point, I'm just going to pull up these scoring sheets so we can take a closer look at them together. So this is what the file looks like. These are the instructions. It's just the 2 tabs, which is hopefully pretty easy for all to follow. You don't have to worry about thumbing through too many tabs. These are the instructions themselves. So the team captains will put in the name of your agencies and initiatives at the top, and then they will email them out to all of their team members. And of course, you just want to make sure our team captains remember to include their own score in there as well. You'll want to make sure that you only modify the highlighted sections. You can put the comments in. I'm going to show you it up close here. So blue, for example, matches all the way across. Agency 1 is blue. The name of the initiative is blue. These are the scores. This is where the comments will be. Red for agency 2, so on. And we'll make sure that all the team members are consistent in the scoring. The nice thing about the site visit scoring, which is a pretty major adjustment this year, is that you will put in using drop-down menus, I should point out. So each category has a max number of points and you'll select the score from the drop-down menu, or you can type it in as well, but it gives you an idea of the range. So, you know, I gave them 24 for the programming. I'm going to give them a score of 22 here for the next category. I'm just filling these in so you can see the nice way that the formula lets them auto-populate at the top. So it's based out of a 100 rubric. And so this agency for this initiative has scored an 83, which automatically converts to 17 points out of the 20 at the top here. And it will be inputted in the top, which is why that area is grayed out. You don't have to worry about that. You'll score the bottom and it'll automatically fill it in. And the same exact thing for the top, where you'll select the score from the drop down. You'll get the average here. You'll put your comments and you'll send this back to your captains. I'm going to pause at this point to see if there's anything, Alyssa, that I missed or things that you want to add. I don't see you right away and all the wonderful faces on the side here. So
no, I think you covered it.
okay. Thank you again, Alyssa, for all of the extra time and effort that you put into this. And as folks are actually doing the scoring and getting to that part of the process, we're more than happy to answer more questions that come up as well. And I have just a couple more quick slides to go through, and then we'll open it up for any questions that you may have. Let's go back into our slides. Okay, so a couple of tools that we've learned of to help schedule the site visits with your teammates and with the agencies. This is mostly for the captains, but we recommend Doodle. I bet many of you are familiar with that. If you're not, it's a free website where you can get specific times and dates and have them on the top here. So just a screenshot. And then you can have all of your team members listed on the side. And they're able to go in and check off which dates and times work best for them. Obviously, green means, yep, that works. Red means it doesn't work. And then there's a nice tool that's yellow that means yes, if need be. Maybe it's not the best time, but if it works best for the team, I can make it work. We also just heard at the captain's training a great suggestion of using SurveyMonkey just to generally kind of have the different parts of the day, you know, or mornings best for you, afternoons or end of day, to send out to the teammates to get some feedback initially. We think it's helpful to maybe start with the partner agencies and get some times at work and then go back to your team. And again, we're thankful for everyone's flexibility as we get these site visits scheduled. Typically, they take place during the daytime, which I think everyone knows, and that's kind of part of the volunteer description, but most of the site visits are going to take place in that 9 to 5 window. Does anyone else at this point have any suggestions for ways that maybe you manage different schedules and getting those site visits scheduled that you would like to share? Okay. And then lastly, so we emailed out those RFP packets to everyone last Friday toward the end of the day. I know I've gotten a lot of responses back from folks that they received them, but just please make sure that they're not caught in your junk. Make sure you have them. We have, I think Peter pointed out, a couple of different file types. Some agencies give us PDFs, some folks give us Word documents. Most of the budgets are in their Excel format. So just, you know, look at the little grid that includes the name of your teammates and all of your initiatives and make sure you have them all and you have no trouble opening the files. If you do, please let me know. I'm happy to resend them, to pop you a hard copy in the mail, that sort of thing. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to get to review them all. And that's it. We always like to end with a huge thank you. We truly could not do this process without you, with all of our volunteers. It's great to see so many of you joining us this year. And we thank you for your flexibility in this pandemic and crazy world that we're in right now. You all are bright spots in what we do. So at this point, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see everyone. And if anyone has any questions or comments, we have a couple minutes remaining in the hour. Feel free to unmute or raise your hand. Scrolling through all the faces. Not seeing anything in the chat. Okay, well, you know how to reach us and you know how to reach your team captains. We will send out tomorrow the slide deck, likely the recording, and then we'll send a spreadsheet that has all of the team members by alphabetical order by last name with an email and a phone number. And of course, you have the email chains with your teammates to make it easy to get in contact with one another. So thank you so much. I'll turn it back maybe to Dennis in closing.
I can only just echo what's been said by Carol and Peter and Kim, to say thank you again. It really is awesome. And, again, please let us know if there's anything we can do to help you do what you're doing. Kim is incredibly organized. Peter and Carol have been so dedicated to this. And again, I'll repeat Kim's thank you to Alyssa to taking all the time and energy and thought into providing a better form. I just think we are trying to streamline it for the sake of the agencies and for the sake of our volunteers to try to make this as reasonable a process as can be. But it relies on all of your feedback and all of your involvement. So thank you. Carol and Peter, anything else you'd like to add?
That's great. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, we wish you a great evening and we look forward to getting to work with you over the next couple of months. Thanks again. Take care all.
Thank you.
Thank you.